the broad strokes issue that we're having here, and we're seeing it across the board for tech companies, is I think when a lot of these tech companies emerged and, I don't know, between 2005 and 2015, it was really focused on this is how the internet is going to help regular people connect. And so many of those companies have
Hmm.
completely lost that ethos along the way. Social media is no longer about connecting. It's about turning your brain off and mindlessly consuming content. Very rarely
Yeah,
do I
it's a
see do I
pity.
do I see anything from people I actually know or allows me to check in with my friends. And I think that same process has now taken over these dating apps where money and revenue, but also more importantly profitability, have been placed above the usability of the central product. And because of that, they've lost touch with why they were started in the first place.
This podcast is sponsored by Cadiz Inc., Nasdaq ticker symbol CDZI. Cadiz is a water company that's shown great growth over the past 2 months. Cadiz has 5 billion in water assets and the largest water pipeline in the southwest. The Cadiz ranch holds twice the amount of water as Lake Mead. Led by CEO Susan Kennedy, the former chief of staff for Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, Cadiz is eager to combat the water crisis in the southwest. Always do your own research before making any investment decisions. The information provided here is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice.
Hi there, and welcome to Stock Club, a podcast brought to you by MyWallSt. I'm Anne-Marie. I'm filling in for Mike, who's on annual leave. This week, we are talking dating apps. Match Group and Bumble have had huge sell-offs, and we are going to dig into the entire market and figure out what's gone awry. Emmet also has a really intriguing and timely elevator pitch for you towards the end of the episode. But before we get into today's show, a reminder of our exclusive offer to our loyal listeners. With the code STOCKCLUB20, you can get 20% off across our entire product line here at MyWallSt. That means 25% off Invest, 20% off Invest Plus, where our market-beating stock of the month lives, 20% off Horizon, our exclusive service where you can invest side by side by our chief investor, Emmet Savage, or 20% off Nexus, our international service dedicated to uncovering hidden gems from around the world. This service has returned almost 30% since its inception about 9 months ago, which is pretty good if we do say so ourselves. Whatever you're in the market for, we've got you covered with the code STOCKCLUB20 at checkout. This is exclusive for you, our podcast listeners, so head on over to mywallstreet.com and check out our services and find what's best for you. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Hello and welcome to Stock Club, a weekly podcast brought to you with love from Dublin, Ireland by a collective of stock nerds who, through sheer brute force and ignorance, have overcome any semblance of fear of microphones and cameras. I'm Emmet Savage, and this week I'm joined by my friend and colleague Anne-Marie Kingsland. How are you doing, Emma?
I am good. How are you?
I'm very well, yeah, feeling refreshed after a summer vacation. Amory, before we talk dating apps and whatever else we
Yeah.
happen across, yesterday you sent me an urgent internal memo with a link to the BBC with a clip showing Waymo self-driving cars
Yeah.
stuck in a parking lot honking at each other. And it was like looking at a bunch of dogs together where they were kind of aware of each other and happy enough to be around each other with the occasional bark here and there. Is
Yeah.
this a bug or an endearing feature?
I once again felt sad for them, which I know we have previously discussed. Like I have a thing of like I personify the technology, and apparently we're not
They're
supposed to
not
be doing that.
sentient, Anne-Marie. You
I
cannot pity
know,
a non-sentient thing.
and it's not good for their efficiency. It's like when you be really polite to ChatGPT, and then it gives you nonsense. But
Yeah.
I think the problem is that the Waymos don't recognize each other as Waymos. They just think they're cars with people in them. So then they're very
Ah,
hesitant to do anything. They sit and honk. When in reality, I think it would be not if they could know that each other was self-driving, it would probably have improved. But
yeah.
all the machine learning fans online were like, this is actually a human error issue because there's supposed to be people monitoring the Waymos at all times, in case something happens. And so somebody should have been sent an alert being like, there are 40 Waymos stuck in the parking lot. Someone should look at this.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it just didn't happen. I do believe that is the parking lot they sleep in. I think that they go there like when they're not needed. So they were supposed to be there, but it was at 4 o'clock in the morning that footage is from. And
Oh,
they
you couldn't
apparently,
be too happy. They can't be
no.
apartments where the video was taken from,
Yes,
are
that's
they?
somebody's apartment. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
no. You can't have them have their little nighttime party outside your bedroom window at 4 a.m.
and
That's no, that's a bug. That's not a feature.
yeah, and that's apparently been going on for a couple of days. That's why the person got up and took the footage.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You'd
The
think you would
evolution of tech.
almost you'd get to the point, I think, when you would go out there with like those light up cones that they use at the airport.
Mm.
And I think you would try and start to direct traffic. I think that would be the point I would get pushed to. By day 3, I would be out there talking to the Waymos. I'd be like, you need to just move a little bit to the
You
right.
need to go home.
And then this Waymo will come in behind you and park, like that, I think would be my strategy.
Well, I moved in the early 80s. I moved very near Dublin Airport.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid, for the first few nights, I was woken all through the night by the sound of airplanes. And then
Mm.
I never heard an airplane again. It's just how the brain filters out white noise. And I guess my point is that the taker of that video should have just given it another week. And
Yeah.
right, look, Anne-Marie, as you know, last week I recorded a segment that I thought was going to be a solo podcast. However, you and
Yeah.
Mike very kindly came in and backed it up with a second section because my bit was a bit short. So
Yeah.
listeners got 2 half shows for the price of one. So I thought that was pretty good value. So anyway, as our editor in residence, you also know that I asked our audience to write in and tell me if they enjoyed my solo effort. And I was really taken aback by the number of people who dropped me a note to that effect. So I'd like to thank Jeff, Henry, Gary, Jim, Keith, Kyle, Philip, Connor, Niall, and about 10 other folks who took the time to encourage me to go for it again. I'm very appreciative of those people taking the time to open an email and drop me a note. So I will indeed do another solo podcast very soon, whether people like it or not. There were 2 suggested names that I particularly liked. The first was Admitted Emmet, Confessions of a Serial Stock Investor, which came from Kyle Bowes Taylor. And the other one I particularly liked was Fortunes and Footprints, which came from Niall Savage, who I'm not related to, by the way. So thank you both, guys, for those ideas. I need to retract and do a little bit more thinking and planning and record the next show, and we'll probably brand it, and I don't know what we're going to do with it. I'll speak to you, Anne-Marie, about that. But in the meantime, I'm going to hit everybody with the shameless sneak peek, which is short and simple. So today, Thursday, August 20th, 2024, I'm pitching a new stock in Horizon that I'm 95% likely going to buy. In the opener of the pitch I'm making today, I mentioned that as Horizon has evolved, there's been 3 broad types of investments that have emerged. The first is coffee can stocks, which, as we've discussed on this show before, is a concept brought to the fore, I think, by Chris Mayer and somebody before him, I can't recall. But basically, these are ideal for long-term holding and suitable for leaving untouched for 20 years, like locking the stock certificate away in a coffee can. The second type of stock is a wild card, which has potential for very rapid growth and significant gains. And then the third type is a little bit of both. Well, the company I'm going to pitch today falls into this middle ground. It's a business that I really want to own for decades, and I think will have wild card returns. So I presume, Anne-Marie, we can drop a link to sign up in the show notes. Okay, let's do this thing. Anne-Marie, on to our main story, which you very kindly are going to take this week, which is about Match Group and Bumble, who both recently reported earnings and both disappointed the market. Bumble is down more than 90% from its 2020 IPO, and Match is at a 6-year low, which is down 75%. So, Anne-Marie, you've been looking into this. What are the numbers behind these massive drops? And are we at the end of app-based dating?
I mean, I don't think we're at the end of the app-based dating, but Match and Bumble are having a really, really hard time. So the 2 of them make up the vast majority of the dating public market, I guess you could say. Together, they have lost $40 billion in market value since 2021.
Ouch.
That is
Yeah.
astounding. And
Wow.
we do seem to be coming down from a pandemic high. So some of this is environmental macro factors. When people were locked up at home in 2021, there was a lot of online dating going on because there was kind of nothing else to do. So I will give them that. There is that happening. But I also think that both companies have failed to innovate and deliver a worthwhile product in an environment that is rapidly evolving. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But first, we're just going to unpack some of these usage numbers. So the Pew Research Center has found that 30% of American adults have used an online dating service. And when we zoom in on the 18 to 29 group, that number is going to jump up to 50%. So 50% of people have used one of these apps at some point. And interestingly, within that age group, 1 in 5 couples has met on a dating app. So there is some success, there is some usage going on here. And today, roughly 350 million people worldwide will have a dating app on their phone. And that's up from 250 million in 2018. So there is a broad wind of increasing usage that is blowing, I suppose, decade over decade here. But if we zoom in and we look at usage quarter over quarter, things are beginning to fall. So 237 million dating apps were downloaded last year, and that's down from 287 million in 2020. So there's a little bit of a download drop, but more significantly, according to Sensor Tower, the number of people who use them at least once a month has dwindled from 154 million in 2021 to 137 million in the second quarter of this year. But the true red flag, the absolute worst thing that we're seeing, is Axios has found that only a fifth of American college students are using a dating app at least once a month. And back in the day, for Tinder and Bumble, college campuses were their bread and butter. That's how they launched. They used that
Right.
classic Facebook style network effect to get in front of people. You know, they'd go onto one college campus, they'd get a bunch of popular kids on the app, and then they'd say, right, you go find 10 friends and get them on the app too. So to think that only
Okay.
20% of current college students are using these apps is, I would say, disastrous if that's meant to
Yeah.
be your main target market. And in a sign of growing despair, the New York Times cited the growth of the marriage pact as a poor reflection of dating apps' appeal and ability to deliver. And for those of you unaware, the marriage pact is an annual event in which participants are matched with their backup spouse should their future romantic endeavors fail. And they are now on 88 college campuses. So it's not looking good, guys. Like, there is.
Now hold on, back up the bus. This is so it's your B plan.
Yeah.
And you know you're the B plan. So you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I like Emery, but she likes this other person. But if that doesn't work out, I'm coming in.
Yeah.
That's what the idea is.
Yeah. It's you being like, if we're both single at 40, we're going to try this out.
You know what? It's pragmatic. I think it's a pretty good idea. You know, as
Yeah.
long as you don't get too hypersensitive about it. If everybody's being a grown up, kind of
Yeah.
makes sense, I think.
And it's done by data. Like, I think you fill out a massive survey and then they'll be like, okay, here's your top 2. These are most compatible. Go talk to them, see how you go.
Right.
Anyway, it's on 88 college campuses across the US. So this is growing in popularity. And this drop in usage that I discussed earlier, it's beginning to hit the finances. And that's why we had this massive sell-off. So on August 7th, Bumble reported revenue growth of just 3% year over year and lowered its forecast for the full year to 1 to 2% revenue growth. And that meant that its shares plunged about a third in after-hours trading. Move on to Match Group. It reported revenue growth in the same quarter of just 4%. So again, that is hard.
But you mentioned a bit there, but what would you say is the main, cultural and business changes impacting them both?
Yeah, so as I said, there is some macro stuff at play here, so we can write that off for them. That can be in their corner. But I also think that there are some industry-specific things that are kicking off here. And I think it's all coming back to the underlying issue with dating apps, which is that it's actually not in their favor for you to get a long-term partner, because that means you delete the app and you stop
Of course.
generating money.
Yeah.
Right. So like that's the issue. So that is always the undercurrent here. And I think that's become particularly vicious as we've moved into an era that has been dubbed a loneliness epidemic. And so I just think that it's the taste in people's mouths are kind of like, oh, I don't like this. Like, I feel manipulated.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
if we dig in and we talk to the journalists and we talk to the researchers, there are 3 main reasons here that people seem to be moving away from dating apps. Number 1, users have become increasingly suspicious of others on the platform. There are more and more fake accounts and scammers. Number 2, there is a huge gender imbalance issue. There is far more men than women on most of these apps, meaning that women are being inundated with messages while many men are going without any matches, which is horrible for your self-esteem. That's not nice. That also means that a lot of these men who are going about matchless can be very easily manipulated by these companies to spend a bunch of money on the platform, because they're going, hey, I'm not getting any matches. Like, oh, I know it's because all the good matches are being hidden. I need to pay a premium fee. And that's just not very nice. Like, it's not nice to do that to people. And then number 3, lots of people look down on you if you pay for a dating app. Even though the apps are now functionally useless if you're not paying, there is an overall sense that if you are paying for a dating app, it's a little bit desperate. And I know that doesn't
Really?
make any sense. Yes.
It makes no sense whatsoever. I mean,
Yeah.
like, especially if you're in an app judging somebody else in the same app, It
Yeah.
just, it's kind of very contradictory.
Yeah, but here we're going to unpack these three issues now. Now, okay, number one, users have become increasingly scared of scams. That's actually pretty fair.
Okay.
So in
Yeah, it is.
2024, a survey from Boston University found that nearly 50% of people agreed with the statement: dating apps are filled with too many machines posing as real people. And then I went on to read a profile of a woman who trained ChatGPT to essentially do like the first layer of filtering for people. But then the
Right.
ChatGPT went off the rails and started quoting all kinds of weird stuff and messaging people, and then she had to shut it down. And so there is some that is definitely happening, and fair enough for people because they don't want to waste their own time. I don't think any of the companies are helping with this. They haven't really talked that openly about filtering stuff. And actually, Bumble's founder Whitney Wolf Herd got
Yeah.
caught in a viral clip about 2 months ago where she suggested that the future of dating was everyone creating an AI facsimile, which would date people on your behalf, and then it would kind of just come to you with the most successful candidates,
Oh,
which
please.
personally sounds like a nightmare scenario.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
But Amory, here's a question for you. Would a little quick video FaceTime call with your potential
Mm,
not just solve that? Now, I understand, look, I haven't obviously thought deep about it, but the privacy barriers and the ability to screen people quickly, but like speed dating was a thing back in
yeah.
the early 90s, where everyone just walked from one table to the next. And like, surely that's a way of just making sure the person is real. You look in the whites of their eyes,
Mm.
you get the quick read, which is frankly how most of us move forward when we have a first engagement with them. So would that not fix it?
I think I think it would help, but I think there's also the issue of people have almost become immune to people online and almost don't see them as being people, because I think, have you heard of ghosting? That's when, you might go on a
Yeah.
few dates with somebody and then you just never ever speak to them again and you
Thanks for
don't.
asking me. Have I heard of it? Like
Yeah.
that's real nice.
Yeah, just in case, I don't know. And so I think that sometimes means that when people are talking to people online or they're interacting with them, even if they've gone on a few dates with them, sometimes they're almost there's no stakes there, because it's not like, oh, she's a friend of a friend of a friend, and that's how and that's how we were introduced, and now we're going on a date. So if I ghost them and never show up again, someone might
Yeah.
be like, oh, that'll get back to your friends. That doesn't happen here. So I think people's behavior sometimes is not the best. And then
Mm.
number two, we've talked about that second issue. There are way more men than women on these platforms, and that is getting worse over time. Tinder, would you like to take a guess? What percentage of the platform is men?
Uh, 80%, 80-20 rule.
84% of the platform is male.
84%. Man, you're up against the crowd.
Yeah,
That's tough.
you're fighting over 16% of
Yeah.
the rest for the women.
Yeah,
And
that's rough.
yeah, and even on Bumble, which is meant to be the female focused app, 61% of the users are men. So even when there's been a big outward push to try and correct this, they can't get it to the 50-50 parity point. And then we have that issue of that means half of women surveyed by Pew said that they felt overwhelmed by the number of messages that they received. So then I think it means that a lot of women back off because they're being inundated with matches, and it's very then difficult for them to filter, because if you're getting 100 matches, how are you ever supposed to pick somebody? Ideally you'd maybe get between 5 and 10. That's a bit of a realistic filtering scenario. And then obviously the apps have no incentive to change this because they have all these men who are fighting over a very small percentage of the users, and that's very easy to manipulate and make money out of.
Right.
That brings us on to point three, which is that people are looking down on you if you pay for an app, even though the apps don't really work if you don't pay for them. So just an example of some of the subscriptions on these dating apps. So Hinge has a separate feed for popular profiles that it thinks you might like, that you might be highly compatible with, but you have to pay for a rose in order to match with one of these people. And a rose costs $3.99. Okay, that's not too
Uh-huh.
terrible.
Okay.
Tinder charges $17.99 for their premium service, which gives you unlimited swipes and lets you change your location. Bumble's
And that's per
equivalent
month,
per month.
17.99 a month.
Yeah.
That's a chunk of
Bumble's
change.
equivalent of the same thing is $19.99 a week.
What?
Yeah, $20 a week. And then Tinder's most expensive service is $499 a month, which lets you see the most popular profiles on the app and message users without having matched with them.
Sorry, give
Five
me that price again.
$500 a month.
Well, they've obviously got people paying for it, or they wouldn't have the price point there. But is the value they're offering even vaguely worth that?
No, because there's no obviously there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee that if you get to message someone without matching them, that they're going to message you back or go on a date or be
Yeah.
interested in you at
Oh,
all.
it's a pit fight.
Yeah.
So
And
here's a
so
question. I'm sorry, I don't mean to break your flow, but I presume it tells the other user you're a paying user. So the fact that somebody is judging you,
mm,
it's implicit that they can see you're a paying member.
I don't think you're labeled, but people would be able to tell because you'd be like, I didn't match with this person and they're
All
messaging
right,
me. It's
I see.
from the perks that you'll be able to get from paying for it. And obviously this format makes all of the users very suspicious. So the Washington Post did an interview with Kevin Power, regular guy Kevin. He's 29 years old. He's used Hinge, he's used Tinder, he's used Bumble. And this is what he said. He said, it feels like dating apps learn my interests and then use that info to hide people who would be most compatible with me behind a paywall. In fact, Power learned from a friend that his own profile was appearing in the standout section for some Hinge users. Power stated, at first I was flattered, but then I remembered that in order for someone to like me from that section, they would need to pay for roses. Hinge is profiting off of me being single. That doesn't make me feel like the company actually wants me to find love on their app. And
Right.
interestingly, Match Group is facing a class action lawsuit from users who say that the apps use psychologically manipulative features to ensure they remain on the app and are perpetually paying subscribers, which I would kind of agree with because there isn't this transparency in terms of usage to understand
Mm.
how people are being categorized and grouped together and pushed together via the algorithm. Additionally, if you cave and subscribe to a dating app, people can be pretty judgy about that. So the New York Times interviewed 18-year-old NYU student Mandy Wang, who said, people use dating apps, but I don't know anyone who pays for it. In fact, she
Right.
said she would consider it an ick if she learned somebody was paying for a dating app subscription. So it's kind of, as I said, it's that thing of like, wow, you couldn't get any likes on the free version, so you had to pay for it kind of a thing, which
Yeah.
obviously is far more common that a man would need to pay for the dating app than a woman. So again, it's just creating this disparity and power dynamic. And this is backed up by data. Catherine DeConduto, a Boston University professor who studies dating apps, says it feels really different to pay for access to people. Paying for it does make it feel a little bit skeezy. And this
Yeah.
dynamic is
Yeah.
showing up in all the company's numbers. Tinder's paid users have declined for 7 consecutive quarters.
If you take a real world analogy, it's, back in the day when, let's say, in a very typical, approach, a man would approach a woman in a bar, very
Mhm.
cliched. It would feel extra weird to the woman if he paid 4.99 to go over and say hello. It would just feel, I'm sure, completely weird. I mean, take real world examples and bring them into the digital world.
Mm.
Those rules broadly still apply. So before I really want to ask you, is anyone having success in the dating landscape? But before we go there, it seems, based on what you explained to me, that Match, Bumble, and Hinge are all perfect substitutes. Do people kind of have a profile on all three? I presume they do. And therefore, like, how do they differentiate?
Yeah, well, so I think it's they all kind of have slightly different cultures to them, which I
Mm,
think impacts the users on them. So Tinder obviously was the first out the gate with gate being app based, but I do think it has more of a hookup casual dating vibe. And then
mm.
Bumble came out after it to try and combat that and was very much more dating conversations. The Tinder profile is just pictures of you, and then the Bumble profile you have to fill out a whole kind of survey where they ask you questions. You maybe put your favorite song, your favorite food, your hobbies. You're fleshed out a bit more. And then Hinge was released by Match to compete with Bumble. So again, it's
Oh, I
more
see.
looking for long-term relationships. You have to create a comprehensive profile. You
Mm,
might
mm.
like tie your social media profiles to it. So that's kind of they're on a spectrum. I suppose. But
Yeah,
also
yeah.
to your point about men don't pay to access the better women, but clubs even back in the day, women got in free and men had to pay a cover charge.
Well, that's absolutely correct. Yeah, exactly. I looked at Match.com years ago, years and years ago, and it had a lot of assets, an awful lot of
Yeah.
assets,
Oh
including
yeah.
the Princeton Review, which I thought was a standout
Wow.
strange one. They were the owners of the Princeton Review. I don't entirely know what the Princeton Review is, but I remember I had a prestigious brand at the time. And I think at the time I had about 52 apps for every kind of stage of life and interest and orientation and religious belief and ethnicity or whatever. Like they segmented everything,
Yeah.
and they did what I would have presumed a reasonable good job, so you could at least participate in a community that aligns with your
Yep.
beliefs and your desires. But what app out there is actually having success? Surely in this
Mhm.
kind of this landscape of dating apps, one or more of them are doing particularly well.
Well, that was actually a pretty excellent intro there because the apps that are having success are the ones that are more focused on a specific social group. So, similar to what we've seen behaviorally on social media, people are retreating into smaller, more focused spaces. And that seems to be now that if you want to have success in the dating market, you need a narrow market. You need to have a very specific group and niche and target market, and what people you're going after. And so, for example, Grinder, which is an app for gay men, that would be far more in the kind of Tinder sphere, hookup culture area. That is growing quickly, and its stock is up 122% this year.
Yeah.
So, so they've been doing pretty well. Match Group also has apps targeted at gay men, Archer, single parents, Stir, ethnic minorities like Black and Chispa, and snobs, which is called the League. So,
Sorry,
if
what? Snobs.
snobs,
Is
yeah,
that actually the meaning that I understand it to be?
yes,
Somebody
like,
hoity-toity, high and
yep,
mighty.
yeah,
Right, okay.
yeah, and that sentence
Uh,
was taken directly from an article of The Economist. So that's how they wrote it.
right.
Single parents, ethnic minorities, and snobs, all of our key
How many people
demographics.
self-identify as a snob? Snob is something somebody else calls you, like, "Oh, look at them, they think they're too good, they're a
Yeah.
total snob." Who wakes up and goes, "I'm such a snob. Hand me my slippers," you know?
I guess it's the Gossip Girl effect. Like, there's been a lot of TV
Ah.
shows in the last 10 to 15 years that have really glorified Upper East
Oh,
Side
yeah.
wealth, generational thing. And so
Yeah.
I think it's actually an aesthetic people lean into now, even if it's not true. But revenue from this portfolio of brands that Match has, its niche is actually up 17% year on year. So that group is growing. In addition to offering specialized services to a smaller pool of partners, it also allows you to kind of serve a like-minded community in ways beyond dating. So an example of that is Grinder actually does run a successful travel guide for tourists
Yeah.
who might be looking for gay bars when they go abroad. And they also run a hub of information on HIV and STDs. So stuff, it's just kind of like the additional features that they're able to add in makes people feel like they're being more catered to when they're using
I
that app.
see.
The idea of targeting a broader community or I guess you could say a range of smaller communities does actually seem to be what Bumble is trying to go after now. Lydia Ann Jones, who is the chief executive of Bumble now, Whitney Wolf Herd, who was the founding CEO, has stepped down. She said that she wants her firm to be known as a connections company rather than strictly a dating app company. So
Hmm.
that seems to be where we're moving thematically, but still a lot of work to do.
Oh, big time. So where do Match and Bumble go from here? If it is a duopoly of sorts or a
Mhm.
perfect substitute product, which, as you explained, isn't really, their legacy internet brands. Is there a second age for app-based
Yeah.
dating going to emerge, or is this the slow and steady decline in a post-virus world?
I mean, I'd say the next year to 2 years is going to be the deciding factor. They're going to need to innovate. That's what's
Yeah.
going to have to happen here. As Zach Morrissey says, he's an analyst at Wolf Research. This is a space where product innovation has been relatively muted in recent years. Match doesn't really seem to have any kind of concrete ideas where it wants to go, to be completely honest. Its
Mm.
chief executive, Bernard Kim, told analysts in January that Tinder was adopting a fast fail mentality, a strategy that prioritizes rapid experimentation and testing. He took over the company in 2022, where he previously served as the president of Zynga, which is the maker of mobile games, namely
Oh, yeah.
Farmville.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I want somebody who specialized in app-based games to be recreating Tinder, but okay. Additionally, the activist investor Elliott Management has taken $1 billion stake within Match. We actually just talked about Elliott last week because they have also taken a very large stake in Starbucks, another massive important
Hmm.
brand trying to
Hmm.
rebuild. Um, Elliott's got a pretty good record. So if Elliott has taken $1 billion stake, I would assume they've already gotten in on the board and are starting to lean on people. So that's the Match story. The Bumble story, I think, is more interesting here. And I think that is because they already have an established foot in this community door. So Bumble has a secondary and tertiary product. The first is called Bumble Biz, which is like a networking business, kind of like a soft LinkedIn for women, and Bumble BFF, which helps people find friends, which I think is really
Hmm.
nice. We don't really have a lot of services like that because if you got transferred for work and end up in a completely new city, you don't know anyone, how are you going to make friends? Like, I think that that's a good idea. And I have a couple friends who have used it to meet new people in cities when, they're touring somewhere. And I think that's a good idea. My one qualm with these two is Bumble is really bad about providing metrics to them, which makes me think that traditional romantic Bumble continues to drive the vast majority of user growth. It's actually so bad that one time I was trying to write something up about Bumble that I twice emailed the investor relations being like, can I have broken out user metrics for these other two subcategories, and nobody responded to me. So that's the only thing. It's like Bumble BFS
Yeah.
has existed for 4 years, but I actually don't know how many people use it. But maybe if they can do some marketing and push and brand and move around, that could be a good idea. On top of that, Bumble acquired a company called Geneva, an
Oh,
online platform built around forming real world groups and clubs 3 months ago. And they said it's to help them move from one-to-one connections to groups and communities. I actually think this is smart again, because a lot of the in-person dating culture has moved to clubs, activities, hobbies. There's a running joke online that run clubs are the new Tinder. People are going on
oh, right.
runs.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
And so I think if Bumble takes the digital side of that, helping people be like, oh, I'm really into knitting, I'm going to start a knitting club. I think that's smart. You merge the in-person experience
Yeah,
with an online networking. And that also is smart because once that person does find a partner and maybe leaves the romantic side of Bumble, it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll delete Bumble altogether.
yeah.
But again, I have no user metrics on any of this stuff, so I actually don't know how good they are at doing it. But that's what I'd be keeping an eye on. The other thing to remember, both of these companies make a lot of cash. Even though they're in this revenue decline, they're quite profitable. So, for example, Bumble had an adjusted EBITDA for Q3 of $80 million. It brought in $80 million. It doesn't have that much debt and it has a fair amount of cash. So they do have money to play with here. And however, I think to remember with Bumble is they've already committed to a stock buyback. They still have another $210 million worth of buybacks that they need to exercise before the end of the year. And with their
Hmm.
current stock price, that means that they're on track to repurchase between 20 and 25% of their total float.
Of
So,
all the things you said, I think there's something. I have a business idea, and it's
mm,
for a dating app called Fallback. Okay, and
okay.
it helps you keep your self esteem in check. So everybody loves we're all friends here, but I'm
Yeah.
your fallback. You need someone to go to your cousin's bar mitzvah or a wedding
Oh,
or the
nice.
prom. I'm your man or I'm your woman or I'm your person.
Hmm.
Just if you do better, good for you. If I don't hear from you, no problem. But
Yeah.
if you need me on the day, I'll dress nice. I won't use bad language. I won't get drunk. I'll shake
Mm.
hands with your relatives and I'll dance. Actually, no, there's no man who'd ever sign up for that. No Irish man would ever go, yeah, yeah, I'm sure, no problem. I'll
Yeah.
dance at your cousin's wedding. But I do think there's a bit of a B plan or fallback opportunity
Mm.
there where you're like, hey, look, there's a lot of lovely people out there and I only need one shot at being their fallback. So there we
Yeah.
go. That's my gift to the world. You can go develop that, everybody. I'm not going to
Fallback.
do it. No,
I do
no
think you.
interest.
I think you just described a friend, though, right? Like
What?
someone who you're like,
Oh,
I have a plus one to a wedding. Who should bring my friend? You should bring your
oh,
friend.
that.
Yeah. I don't think you I need.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. I
Yeah.
forgot about that social construct, friendship.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I suppose we have to
Yeah.
figure that out. Oh, well, look, we'll figure it. We have to get rid of friends to create the market opportunity. That's our blue
Perfect.
ocean strategy. Friends
Yeah.
are useless. They let you down. I want to be your fallback.
Oh, that
On
actually that
the-
was a pretty good tagline. That wasn't bad. All right. Okay.
The muses are singing. I better write this down.
Yeah.
Okay, look, Amory, that was fascinating, and it's a story we'll stay connected to over the years as we podcast because
Mhm.
it's there. It's very interesting because one of
Yeah.
the basic human needs is to connect with somebody you care for, and it seems
Mhm.
the whole rules of the game are changing rapidly.
Yeah. I think. Well, I
Anything
think.
else?
Well, I think the broad strokes issue that we're having here, and we're seeing it across the board for tech companies, is I think when a lot of these tech companies emerged, and I don't know, between 2005 and 2015, it was really focused on this is how the internet is going to help regular people connect. And so many of those companies have
Hmm.
completely lost that ethos along the way. Social media is no longer about connecting. It's about turning your brain off and mindlessly consuming content. Very rarely
Yeah, it's a pity.
do I see anything from people I actually know or allows me to check in with my friends. And I think that same process has now taken over these dating apps where money and revenue, but also more importantly profitability, have been placed above the usability of the central product. And because of that, they've lost touch with why they were started in the first place.
Do you know the best stuff happens in the real world? It just doesn't
Yeah.
happen in an app. Some nice stuff happens in app, and it's definitely serving a role. But just getting out there, it's the only way, in
Yeah.
my opinion, to make stuff work. Anyway, so there you have it.
You
Nice,
you
nice
you
stuff.
can do an in-person dating event at your Horizon event at the end of the year.
speed
Yeah.
dating for stock investors. And it's
Yeah.
like, what's your favorite small cap? Lemonade. No, I have no interest in that. Goodbye. Next. How are you
Yeah.
doing? What's your biggest loser? Oh, my biggest loser was
Lemonade.
Illumina. Lemonade. Oh, I like you.
Yeah.
So-
The only issue there is it maybe would have an even worse gender split than Tinder. It would be all
Oh my
men.
God.
Yeah.
Well, even when I read out the names of everybody who took the time to
Yeah.
send me a note, it was exclusively, I presume, from the names male. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I have noticed that the pursuit of individual stock investing is tilted towards males. But look, there's a whole story there. I'll tell you another time, because when John Tyrrell and I founded My Wall
Yeah.
Street, we noticed this and we're like, we're going to make this gender neutral. But honestly, it was like trying to push a boulder up a mountain. It's just a tough fight, and
Mm.
we didn't have the resources. Right, Emma, I'm going to do an elevator pitch.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Have we time? Will I do one?
Yeah. 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 We've got time.
Okay, I'll do an elevator pitch. I'm going to pitch a stock that I actually all pitched in Horizon in December 2021, and then I later removed it from my watch list for various reasons that were pertinent at the time. And the company is called Fubo TV, and it's a stock, it's a business that's starting to get interesting again. So Fubo TV is a streaming television service, but I think they'd love to be known as the Netflix of sport, or the Netflix of live
Yeah.
sport, and that's primarily their focus. And they offer subscribers a huge, big range of channels and sports channels, and all things to do with sports entertainment. It was launched in 2015 and initially started as a soccer only service, but has since expanded into everything American, you might say. So NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, and every other TLA, three-letter
Nice.
acronym that exists. Yeah, and lots of niche sports and international events and more. And when I pitched it for Horizon, it had something like 110, 113 channels and just less than 1 million subscribers. Now it has 200 channels, but their subscriber base hasn't grown proportionately. They're about 1.17 million subscribers, which isn't huge growth for a business that identified a niche. But the reason I thought I'd give it a short and hopefully snappy pitch here is because a federal judge has temporarily blocked Venue Sports. A Venue Sports, is it? And this is a streaming joint venture formed by Disney, Fox, Warner Brothers, and Discovery on
Wow.
antitrust grounds. So Fubo were quaking in their boots, no question or doubt about it, when they saw these giants of media combining to do what they do. So it was a huge win, which said, and Fubo said that it would have gone insolvent by the first quarter of next year without this block by the American courts. And their shares immediately jumped 17%, as you might expect, following the news, and is up about 40% now. And that's when I say that's since last Friday. So this is a business that suddenly has been given a very significant lifeline. And Venue, or Venu, I'm not too sure how to pronounce it, was set to be priced at $43 per month, and was expected to launch in the next few weeks before the start of the NFL's regular season, which I think is kind of early September, and now could be delayed until at least 2025, or the streaming partners involved could choose to scrap the bundle altogether. So that whole plan has suddenly hit the rocks. And it's particularly rough for Warner Brothers. Discovery last month lost out on the NBA broadcast rights, and earlier this month wrote down the value of its TV networks by $9 billion. And I know, Anne-Marie, you've particular expertise in this whole area. And so far, streaming subscriber growth and income from adverts just hasn't replaced traditional cable earnings. So
Hmm.
that's my pitch. But I would say to listeners, buyer beware,
Yeah.
caveat emptor, mind the gap, and all that kind of stuff, because there will be appeals. There's no two ways about it. Businesses don't go, oh, okay, and walk away, especially when you have these giants of media all I was going to say colluding, all working together to deliver something new. But for now, Fubo TV has been thrown a very quick lifeline, and it might endure. So it's one that's very interesting. And let me just say, right now, today, at market close last night, it closed at about $1.86. Its market cap was $607 million. It had no PE, which means it's not profitable yet. And yeah, that's it. Jump in, have a look, explore it. If you know the business, drop us a line and let us know if you think it's a good one. It's a long
Very
elevator
good.
ride, really, isn't it?
Well, no, it's good. There was a lot of context that needed to be in there because I mean, you could have given the 15 seconds, just said Fubo TV. Take a look.
Yeah, true. Two floors. How you doing? Bye, Fubo. See you later. Have a nice day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one to look at. What's your hunch on it, Anne Marie, as a resident expert on all things streaming?
I mean, it's interesting because we were just talking about the importance of niche groups and actually making
Yeah,
solutions for various communities. And this is the sports solution to streaming.
200
Um,
channels. You can't argue with that.
yeah, which we haven't necessarily seen before.
Yeah,
And it reminds me of Mubi. You know, they're the streaming service that just does independent films. They're not very expensive. They're like €5 or €6 a month.
right.
But they're quite successful because they are serving a niche.
Oh,
And
interesting.
that would be kind of my thought process there is if they can keep Disney and Warner Brothers and all these other big companies away from them, that's a good sports is a massive niche to be serving. There's a reason why Netflix is trying to buy the rights to all these sports events. It's kind of the last frontier, I suppose you'd call it
It is, yeah.
for streaming.
And
Yeah.
it's the never-ending story. There's
Oh
fresh
yeah.
content 365. So whether
Yeah.
it's golf or darts or NFL or NBA or ice
Yeah.
skating or high diving or Olympics or you name it, there's everything
Yeah.
every day. And I
Yeah.
think that's nice.
Yeah.
Right, Anne Marie, great show. Enjoy chatting with you. Glad to be back. That other fella's away, which is just fantastic. Hopefully now
I
we can do a few
know.
more shows.
I know he's gone to Portugal. Could you believe that? Imagine
Ah.
going on vacation to Portugal.
Do you know,
Mm.
talking about going back into the real world and how nothing beats being in the real world. When I was in Porto, I hopped into an Uber. I was on
Yeah.
my own and I ended up singing bossa nova with the driver at full belt. When I told him I'd studied bossa nova in the school of music, and he was a proper bossa nova musician from Brazil with a full band consisting of his cousins and family and friends and neighbors.
Nice.
And he's on Spotify. I must give him a shout out. I don't remember his name, but man, this guy had the chops. And I thought you just wouldn't get this online. You just
Yeah,
wouldn't. Me
that's
driving
true.
through Porto singing bossa nova, Antonio Carlos Jobim with a proper Brazilian. I was in
Nice.
my element.
Perfect.
Quirk.com, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Amo. Thank you for that. And I don't even know what we're meant to say when we finish, other than good luck. See ya.
I know. I just realized that neither one of us we didn't decide who was doing the outro. So it's
What? What?
what does Mike say? I think he's like, thank you for joining us this week. We'll talk to you again next week. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Rate us if you enjoyed this
Yeah,
episode. Follow us on TikTok at Stock Club Pod. You can
nice.
tweet at us at My Wall Street
Yeah,
HQ if you have any ideas, any questions, any thoughts. Pod at mywallstreet.com is our email. Drop us a line.
yeah. Like
I
and
think
follow
that's
for more.
everything.
Give us
Excellent.
five
Perfect.
stars. Okay,
Good.
and
All right, we
all
did
the
it.
stuff we said are in the show notes. Nice one, Amo.
Yeah. All right, perfect. See you next week.
Bye.